I'm Taylor Rose, and this is my April reading wrap up. I was able to finish 4 books in April, and I started a fifth one, but didn't finish it yet. We're gonna go in order of the books that I did finish. First up was Wizard of Most Wicked Ways, published in 2025, so very recently, by Charlie Holmberg. It is the fourth book in her Wimbrel House series, the first of which is Keeper of Enchanted Rooms. So I don't want to spoil anything since it is a long series, but here's a brief synopsis of the first book. In 1846 Rhode Island, writer Merritt Fernsby unexpectedly inherits a long-abandoned estate called Wimbrel House, only to discover the magical property won't let him leave. Enter Huldah Larkin, a specialist from the Boston Institute for the Keeping of Enchanted Rooms, who moves in to help tame the sentient house and uncover its secrets. As Huldah and Merritt work together and grow closer, they face mounting supernatural threats both inside and outside the home. Threats that could endanger not just them, but the powerful enchantments that make Wimbrel House so unique. Now, at this point, I've read every book that Charlie Holmberg has published, and this is definitely not only being her most recent body of work, but I think her best. She does do a lot of historical fantasy, and I really think that's her strength. Several of her other book series and standalone novels are strictly fantasy, and while they are interesting, I have not found them quite as compelling as her works specifically set in sort of alternate universes of our universes time periods. So obviously this one is set in 1800s America. And later in the series, they do go over to England. Her magical systems are always really interesting. You can definitely tell that she went to the Sanderson School of Writing. She did attend his course at Brigham Young University, I believe, which is kind of funny. I should have connected the dots when I found out she was Mormon, that she probably A, went there, B, knew Brandon Sanderson. But it was when I was listening to his writing course this year that his explanation of like what makes a good magic system clicked for me, like, oh my gosh, that's what she's doing. In the Wimbrel House series, magic is genetic, but as humans, for lack of a better word, breed, that is obviously diluting the amount of magical genetic material being passed down. You know, like you always inherit 50% of your mom's genes, but which 50% is up in the air. At the end of the day, like there's no way for you to inherit all of your mother's magic or all of your father's magic. With each successive generation, wizards are getting weaker and weaker. That's what Biker's mission is, to kind of preserve magic. I thought that was really interesting, especially with how it plays into her world building and what is going on with people at the time as they're learning all this information, and especially seeing the impacts of magic on its users, I thought was really well done in this book. Basically, there are multiple types of magic. Huldah, for example, has a weak form of augury, or being able to see the future. Another character has chaocracy, so they cause chaos, basically destructive magic. Another character has, oh, I forget the name. They have a form of magic that's basically changing things, so like shape shifting or changing the color of an object, but when they transform an object, the result is they transform part of themselves at random. So, you know, it could be something really painful, like their leg twists up. The main thing that I enjoy about this series is that it is really cozy. You know, there are stakes, but it's not stressful to read. You still are filled with suspense, like what's going to happen next? How is this going to turn out? But it's not stressful, which sometimes that's really all you need. I find a lot of Charlie Holmberg's books to have a similar feeling, which is why I've read everything she's published. But if I was going to recommend anything written by her, it would definitely be this series specifically. It's a cute historical fantasy romance, zero spice. It's just really cozy and cute. When I finished Wizard of Most Wicked Ways, I actually realized that there were 2 books I still had not read by Charlie Holmberg. Her duology Spellbreaker and Spellmaker, which were published in 2020 and 2021. A brief synopsis of this duology. Elsie Camden, an unlicensed spellbreaker born with the rare ability to undo magic, secretly works for a rebellious group aiding the common people against the magical elite, a la Robin Hood. When she's caught by the ambitious wizard Bacchus Kelsey, she strikes a deal to avoid exposure by helping him with unruly enchantments. As they grow closer, Elsie is drawn into a deeper mystery involving the murders of wizards and the theft of powerful spellbooks. With secrets about her past and growing dangers looming, Elsie must unravel the truth before everything she holds dear is lost. This is another historical fantasy romance. It is set in England instead of America, like her other series. And I am not really sure of the time period. I'm assuming it is the same as the other. They use telegrams. There are no automobiles. The magic system in this series I didn't think was quite as interesting as some of her other magic systems. Basically, there are different types of magic, like there's physical and then spiritual and thought-based magic, and you focus on one because at a certain point you reach your potential and you can no longer learn any more spells. So it's possible to learn various, but the majority of people focus on the one that they're good at. And obviously there's like variations in natural aptitude. Some people can become like the highest ranking with no issue. Others struggle to get past the first rank and learn more advanced magic. But the story focuses on Elsie, who was born with the ability to undo magic. So the wizards, the people with magic, can only put out spells. They can't undo anything. Versus spellbreakers are people who can undo this magic. I kind of felt like this concept was weak because physical magic is described as being, she can see it, but the others involve smell and hearing. Yet somehow the mechanism for Elsie undoing the spell is the same thing. She basically, for physical spells, she can see the rune and untie it, basically kind of like a knot. So with the physical spells, that made sense. She can see it, therefore she can untie it. With the others, the smell and the sound, I didn't really buy it. Like, it's described as the same way. She can sense the knot and undo it, but obviously smell and sound don't have a physical aspect to them. So I would have liked to see that be different, but overall, that's a really nitpicky thing to complain about. I thought the characters in this series were really interesting. Everyone had a pretty unique presence in the story. I didn't feel like they were cookie cutter type characters, which in her some of her very early works, I have gotten that feeling, but this duology is actually what I wanted the Paper Magician series to be more like. The Paper Magician series was one of the first trilogies that Charlie Holmberg wrote, and while I thought that magic system was way more interesting and built out much better than the one in this duology, but the plot shouldn't have been a trilogy. And the main character in that series, I found insufferable. I think if the magic system from The Paper Magician had been brought into this universe, I think that this story would have been greatly improved. But the main issue in the story is that when a wizard dies, his body is converted into a spell book just automatically upon his death. So someone is going around killing wizards and stealing their spell books. It is kind of not necessarily a murder mystery, but it is a mystery. Elsie is trying to find out who is committing all these murders. One thing I kind of had an issue with is that Bacchus Kelsey is supposed to be biracial. It is stated in the text that his father was English, but his mother was from a Spanish country, and he grew up in Barbados. I don't know. The main character just has a lot of thoughts about how exotic he looks. And while I understand that, yeah, England probably was a really homogenous society at, certain points in history, maybe there were other ways to portray that. Sometimes there were just some lines where I was like, I don't know how I feel. But overall, it is one of the better romances that Charlie has written. So I did read both of those books. I actually listened to the audiobooks mostly, with just a few chapters being physically read. I liked the two voices in the dual narration, but I did kind of feel like there was a disconnect between how they played the other voice's character. So when the female narrator was narrating Bacchus's lines, and when the male narrator was voicing Elsie's lines, they did kind of feel like different characters, which kind of seems like a common thing, but I have listened to books where you could tell it was still the same character. That's another nitpicky thing. But either way, I really liked this duology, and I think it's worth a read. Again, it's cozy with more of a mystery vibe than her other series. The next book that I did not finish reading, but I have not DNF'd, is Crier's War, which it was the first time I saw it pop up on Kindle Unlimited. Apparently it was published in 2019. After the Otome, once royal playthings, seized power in the kingdom of Rabu, human servant Ayla plots revenge for her family's death by targeting Lady Crier, the flawless Otoma heir. But Crier, destined to rule in her father's place, begins to question everything she's been taught, especially after meeting Ayla. As their lives intertwine, both girls find themselves caught between duty, deception, and a dangerous attraction that could change the fate of their divided world. The Otome are androids created by the royal family, and then things just spiraled out of control and they took over the country. There was like this huge bloody revolution, and now humanity basically just slaves away for them. Meanwhile, the Otome are still divided on whether they should even have humans around at all. One party thinks that imitating human culture is a beneficial aspect of their society. Another party believes that they should just forget humans entirely, get rid of them, go be separate somewhere else, and have nothing to do with people anymore. I got 3-ish chapters in, and I really, really liked the chapters with Crier. Her point of view is super interesting because she is an Otoma, so she's essentially a robot. How she presents daily life was super interesting. However, the one chapter I did read with Ayla did kind of put me off because, and my opinion may fully change in the future, but I felt like she came off kind of very much young adult heroine. I plan on starting this book over from the beginning, and maybe on a second go through in a different mindset, my opinion of her will change. But as of her first chapter, I was not really a fan, which is why I moved on to my 5th book that I did finish. I read The Hidden Palace by Helene Wecker, which was published in 2021. It is the sequel to The Golem and the Jinni, which was published in 2013. So I've actually had this book in my library since 2021. I had pre-ordered it because I was so excited for it to come out. And then I just got cold feet immediately upon release. I was just afraid to try reading it for some reason. I think because it had been 8 years since the first book came out. I saw it in my library again and decided enough is enough. There's an audiobook. I need to get it taken care of. And I'm really glad that I finally read it. It is definitely much more literary than the other books that I've been talking about. Maybe not Crier's War, but the other three were definitely like cozy, easy reads. It is historical fiction set in the late 1890s, early 1900s, up until around World War I. So, a brief synopsis. Chava is a golem, a woman made of clay, who can hear the thoughts and longings of those around her and feels compelled by her nature to help them. Ahmad is a jinni, a restless creature of fire, once free to roam the desert but now imprisoned in the shape of a man. Fearing they'll be exposed as monsters, these magical beings hide their true selves and try to pass as humans. Just two more immigrants in the bustling world of 1900s Manhattan. Brought together under calamitous circumstances, their lives are now intertwined, but they're not yet certain of what they mean to each other. One thing I really appreciated is that you could probably read this second book as a standalone novel because it does a really good job of filling you in on past events. It's not an info dump. It is a slow trickling of information as you run into characters from the first book, which I really appreciated. It definitely jump-started my memory of The Golem and the Jinni. I didn't feel like I was messing up by not having gone back and reread that first book. Both the books are slow burns, so fair warning. They start off with lots of disparate threads that slowly come together and weave a final climax where everything is connected. You might not enjoy stories like that require more patience to tie everything together, but I think that aspect in particular was so well done in this duology that makes it really worth reading. Since it is a historical, I don't want to say fantasy, even though it brings in mythological aspects from both Jewish and Middle Eastern culture, I wouldn't say it's a fantasy because like 95% of the story is based in real history. It does an amazing job of painting a picture of what life would have been like in 1900s New York City. There are so many aspects, like small details that, the author threw in that really surprised me. For example, one of the characters is describing how it feels when a tram is coming up behind you and physical feelings from change in air pressure and air movement and everything. I never would have given any thought in real life, but then seeing how she describes it was just really beautiful and how that ties into other events in the story. It obviously, I don't know, this woman has to be a historian. I didn't look up anything about her, but fantastic work. I did read the first book with my friend in college who was a history major, and she was in love with it. So who knows? Maybe that means something. I think one of the reasons that I did not read any more books was probably due to this. It is extremely long compared to some of the other books. And I was listening to the audiobook because when I started it, I was still commuting to work. But the audiobook is slow going. The narrator they chose is reading in what I assume to be a Yiddish accent. I might be incorrect there. Feel free to correct me. I'm bad at identifying accents. But that made it difficult for me to listen at a faster pace. Generally speaking, I will listen to audiobooks at 2 times speed. 1.5 speed if I'm doing something strenuous like driving. But Unfortunately, because of the accent, I could barely manage 1.5. I had to listen at 1 times speed the majority of the time. So each chapter was taking like an hour to get through, which, yeah, on my commute, I would get half, 75% of a chapter done. I wasn't even getting a chapter a day, basically. Since I was listening to it on my commute and I was having to pay more attention to get all the details and not miss anything, I would often have to turn it off if traffic were stressful or something because, obviously I don't want to be in a car accident. So while his narration was extremely atmospheric and definitely added a lot to the experience of the story, it didn't really work out for me, unfortunately. It was nearing the end of the month, and I was like, I can't believe I'm only 30% through this story. Like, that is insane. I've been listening forever, it felt like. I just decided to read it on my Kindle on the flight to go to my grandma's 90th birthday, and I finished it on the first flight. Reading it was a lot faster for me, unfortunately, because listening to the audiobook was actually very enjoyable. But I do think that put a dent in my reading progress for the month, unfortunately. That being said, in May, I am planning on finishing Crier's War. I want to restart it with a fresh mind. It does have a sequel, but then after that, I'm not really sure where I'm going to go. There are a few books that I found on Kindle Unlimited that look really interesting. Or do you have any recommendations for books that you think I would like? Feel free to leave them in the comments below. You could probably tell I am definitely more of a fantasy connoisseur. I'm not really into romantasy, but that isn't to say I don't enjoy fantasy romance. There's a distinction there. I will see you later for May's reading roundup in a few weeks.